At number 10 spot, we have the grave with stairs. Just from the photo alone, this is one of the scariest graves I've ever seen. Easy access to the dead, right? Well, this eerie grave belonged to a girl named Florence Irene Ford. Then in 1871, shortly after her 10th birthday, she passed away from yellow fever. So the reason for the stairs, when the daughter was alive, she was always terrified of storms. So you would get the classic mom taking care of her own daughter. But since she has now passed, the mother decided to build stairs down to her casket in order to comfort her daughter when it got stormy. I mean, it's a really sweet idea until you realize it's also really scary. She would go down these stairs, close a trapdoor above her, sit in complete darkness while singing hymns and songs to her daughter. I could only imagine what the people around must have thought when they heard this type of stuff. At number 9 spot, we have the Devil Worshipper Road. Located in Waynesboro, this road's real name is Waynesboro Shibuya Road, or by its more popular name, the Devil Worshipper Road. I know, I read that name and already knew this story was gonna be all types of creepy. Story goes that a local farmer was struggling financially, so in hopes to provide for himself, him and his family decided it was best to sell his soul to the devil. He documented the creature that approached him as being 7 feet tall, red glowing eyes, and holding a pitchfork. Many people say that when they drive on this road at night, their car shuts down, leaving them stranded. And imagine just being in the middle of this rural highway in the middle of the night with nothing but trees and trees all around you. For some people, the spirits try to taunt them by shaking up their car until they either crash or have to stop driving completely. Then when your car is shut off, some claim that a half goat, half man will stand on top of your vehicle. This is basically the plot of any horror movie ever. But who knows if it's real, because why would anyone want to go to a road named Devil Worshipper's Road in the first place? At number 8 spot, we have the Weeping Woman of Callaway Hall. During the Civil War in Columbus, Mississippi, there were stories of a nurse who started to fall in love with a wounded soldier. After months in her care, the two would share stories and life experiences, but as the soldier started to heal back up, he quickly returned back into battle. He left, and after many years, he never ended up returning back to the woman. The nurse, who was named Mary, was so heartbroken that she ultimately made the decision to take her own life. She did this by jumping off the clock tower in the middle of the night. Now locals claim that her distraught spirit remains by the Callaway Hall tower to this day. The security guards report that their faucets would turn on and off, and these are the faucets with the handles you need to physically turn, not no hand sensor one. And she got her name because she tends to wake up students in the middle of the night by crying at the end of their beds. So just imagine what that would look like. At our number 7 spot, we have McCredit's disease. If you look up McCredit's online, you won't find much about it. However, if you're from Mississippi, you've probably heard older relatives mention it. Men back in the day, and sometimes until now, would ingest large amounts of lead, which would make them secrete a chemical and would make the women around them descend into a homicidal rage. For example, women who were the friendliest and happiest would turn into irrational and erratic people. The story started in Europe when a man had an angry mob of women running after him after he ingested a good amount of lead. Finding he couldn't do anything about it, he jumped into the well below freezing river, and with no hesitation, all the girls jumped in and ended up drowning. Then it hit Mississippi when a large group of women became hostile and tried to kill every man in town. I don't know about you, but this is absolutely terrifying, but I'm gonna need more data for this. At number 6 spot, we have Goat Castle. In the August of 1932, Jane Surgic Muriel, better known as Jenny, was found murdered in her home. She had only purchased the home recently, but friends noticed at the moment she got it, she was showing very strange behavior. Many people consider that she was trying to live a hermit lifestyle. By the way, she only had visits from her cousin and suspected lover, Duncan. Shortly after, the two of them would start to have issues with their neighbor, Richard Dana and Octavia Dockery. So when she was found murdered, the police immediately suspected it to be the neighbors, Richard and Octavia. Except when the police went to the couple's home to ask questions, the mansion was in complete disarray and was a complete disaster. Painting was peeling, windows were broken, holes were in the walls, and the house was infested with insects. As well, the house contained live animals, including a goat, hence the name. Eventually, the couple was cleared for murder and allowed to go back into their home, except they would pass away shortly. Now it's said that if you walk into the home, you can see an apparition who is believed to be Jenny, seeking revenge for her murder. Right in the Humber list, we have McRaven Tour Home. This place is sometimes called Mississippi's most haunted house, and for very good reason. The McRaven Tour Home, located at 1445 Harrison Street in Vicksburg, once served as a Confederate campsite and a makeshift hospital. Supposedly, at least 11 people have been buried on the property ground. Many witnesses have reported seeing all of the ghosts who have been buried on the property. These ghosts include Mary Elizabeth Howard, who died during childbirth in the house in 1836. During the siege of Vicksburg, McRaven was transformed into a makeshift hospital. According to local legend, John H. Bob caught some Union soldiers tampering with his crops, became enraged and threw a brick at one of them, and seeking revenge, the soldiers returned later, and that night they killed Bob. making him the third resident to die at McRaven, which he can also be seen walking around the home to this day. At number 4 spot, we have the Witch of Yazoo gravesite. In the middle of the old historic Glenwood Cemetery, there's a chain link surrounding a grave known as the Witch's Grave. According to local legend, a witch lived on the Yazoo River shoreline. This witch would lure in fishermen to tease and torture them for later. Eventually, the frequency of attacks increased and law enforcement was quickly involved. They eventually caught on to her ways and chased her through the swamps where she half drowned in quicksand. As she sank down, she swore her revenge on Yazoo City and the townspeople, saying, quote, "In 20 years I will return and burn this town to the ground." No one thought of it at the time, and then came May 25th, 1904. The fire of 1904 destroyed more than 200 residents and nearly every business in Yazoo City, which is around 324 buildings in total. The witches' graves also has these chains around them, but apparently they need to be replaced constantly since they continue to be broken off. Do you think it's a witch, or is it just some people messing around the cemetery? What do you think? At number 3 spot, we have Witch Dance at Natchez Trace. Staying on the topic of witches, the forest trails of Natchez Trace, located in Tupelo, Mississippi, are said to have been a popular meeting spot for witches back in the day. The sign of the area reads Witch Dance. The very name conjures visions of eerie midnights, swirling back capes, and brooms stacked against a nearby tree. The old folks say the witches once gathered here to dance, and that wherever their feet touched the ground, the glass withered and died, never to grow again. Impossible? Maybe so, but look around. Look for a hidden spot where no grass grows. So basically, when you see dead grass, witches are said to have danced there, and some of these barren or scorched spots of the ground can still be seen to this day. At number 2 spot, we have the Chautauqua Monster. This is basically Mississippi's Bigfoot. So according to the Pike County legend, a circus train was going down the old Illinois Central Railroad, and in a sudden turn of events, it derailed in the swamps near Chautauqua. Except this circus was not like any regular circus. It apparently had many strange critters and creatures on board, one of them being a half man, half ape hybrid, which appeared as a large hairy creature. This creature was very hostile and would attack any person or animal that got too close. So a search party was quickly put together to capture this beast, but they left empty-handed and the monster was never seen again. At number 1 spot, we have Robert Johnson and the Crossroads. This is probably the most original story that related crossroads with selling your soul to the devil. So there's that. So for those who don't know the legend, Robert Johnson was a semi-lackluster guitar player until he decided to journey to the crossroads of Highway 49 and 61 in Clarksdale. This is where he famously made a deal with the devil, where he would sell his soul in exchange for a formidable technique and mastery of the blues. His style did a complete 180, and his style took over jazz with its unique flair. Legend has that 3 of his most hauntingly desperate recordings, Crossroad Blues, Hellhounds on My Trail, and Me and the Devil Blues, are a trilogy of his deal with the devil. And guess how old he is when he died? Yup, 27 years old.
Starting off this countdown at number 10, the Cody Road Bridge. The Cody Road Bridge in northern Kentucky is a railroad bridge that runs over Cody Road, right at the point where a creek runs under the road. So you have the bridge running above you, and the road dips somewhat below it. With the creek and low road, this area is prone to flooding when the creek rises. Flooding here is such a common occurrence that swinging gates have been permanently placed on either side of the creek, marked with stop signs to be closed whenever the water starts to rise. The legends of this area revolve around a woman that passed away in one of the following ways, depending on who you ask. The first one is by taking her own life, either by jumping in front of an oncoming train on the bridge or by jumping from the bridge. The second one is running for help from her burning home that was near the bridge, but got hit by a train in the process. And the last one is getting caught in the current when the road quickly flooded below the bridge, either while in her car or while walking. Reports from this area are often of a woman in white walking the bridge, sometimes crying. Others say yelling for help. Orbs, phantom trains, and disembodied voices are also reported here. Some locals refer to the phantom as pig face, supposedly referring to her injuries after going head to head with the train. Now on to number 9, Narrows Road. Narrows Road in Angler, Kentucky is supposedly where a ghostly police officer likes to hang out. According to urban legend, while making a traffic stop here sometime in the 50s, he was struck and passed away by a passing car. So now, if you drive along Narrows Road after midnight, or at exactly midnight in some tellings, a 1950s style police cruiser will appear and pull you over. Some versions of the legend say the officer will then come to your car, speak to you, then disappear after walking away, while others say he disappears before even reaching watching you. Number 8. Hillbilly Beast. In the back hills of eastern Kentucky near the Ohio River, something stalks through the trees. Many locals believe that the mysterious creature is the Hillbilly Beast of Kentucky, a Bigfoot-like entity. This creature is said to be gigantic and hairy, smells horrid, glides when it runs, and has yellow eyes and a ferocious howl. Reports of this terrifying monster date back to the days of Daniel Boone, but increasing encounters provided enough interest that History's channel Monster Quest featured the Hillbilly Beast in an episode aired on their 4th season. Number 7. Hot Rod Haven. The place known to local folks as Hot Rod Haven is actually a stretch of Mitchell Hill Road. During the period between the 1940s and the 1970s, the road was a popular spot for teenagers to test not only their racing skills but their bravery as well. However, many of them did not come back from the road alive. Mitchell Hill Road is a winding and twisting road that, over time, has reportedly claimed the lives of more than 25 people in the area. As the driver travels down the hill, they come out of the curves into a short straightaway that abruptly switches back into a banking left turn. Prior to reaching the turn, cars are able to reach very high speeds, which often results in tragedy. Legend has it that a young woman and her date were on their way to a dance on the night of September 23, 1950, when they crashed at the bottom of the hill and passed away. Since that time, reports claim that the girl has been seen wandering the roadway and aimlessly strolling the cemetery at the top of the hill. It was here that she was buried side by side with her young lover. The cemetery at the top of the road is a private burial ground for several local families, most notably the Mitchell and Griffin families. Over the years, the ghostly girl has been dubbed both Sarah and Mary by those who've seen the apparition on the road at night. Number 6. The Hopkinsville Goblins. The Hopkinsville Goblins can also be known as the Little Kelly Green Men. This urban legend came directly from a pair of grandparents who live in Oak Grove and wanted to share the legend. Apparently, there was an alien invasion back in the 1950s. A family had reported that they had encountered little green men that they had been battling. The town did what any responsible town does and decided to host a festival in honor of these guys called Kelly Little Green Men Days Festival. Halfway. Number 5. The Poplick Monster. Outside of Louisville on Poplick Creek, a rickety bridge crosses the water. But beware before you step on it. You may become the next victim of the Poplick Monster. Numerous urban legends exist about this creature's origins and the methods that it employs to claim its victims. According to some accounts, this creature uses either hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure trespassers onto a bridge to meet their end before an oncoming train. Other stories claim the monster jumps down from the bridge onto the roofs of cars passing beneath it. Yet other legends say it attacks its victims with a blood-stained axe, and that the very sight of the creature is so unsettling that those who see it while walking across the high bridge are driven to leap off and take their own life. Whether it's the work of a monster or just due to unfortunate accidents, there's no denying that this is a pretty scary legend. Number 4. Sleepy Hollow Road. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, you have to agree that calling anything Sleepy Hollow is a surefire way to end it with something spooky on your hands. Sleepy Hollow Road, located outside of Prospect, is home to a few urban legends, but I'm just gonna talk about the main one. The Louisville Ghost Hunter Society had investigated a trio of tall tales that took place along Sleepy Hollow Road near Prospect in Louisville. It's said that a black hearse appears out of nowhere, speeds up, and causes drivers to run off the road and crash into a ravine 30 feet below. Cries and screams have been heard under what used to be a covered bridge, called Crybaby Bridge, while settlement women went to allegedly toss their unwanted or sickly children that they couldn't or didn't want to care for. And during the 1970s and 1980s, it is rumored that satanic rituals were performed at Devil's Point. Number 3. The Allendale Train Tunnel. The Allendale Train Tunnel is located south of Cincinnati in the woods behind the Allendale Trailer Park in Ellesmere, Kentucky. Years ago, legend says that a man hung himself from a hook that is set above the tunnel entrance and that his ghost is said to walk the tunnel, or some say appears still hanging from the hook. There are also reports of disembodied voices, as well as screams coming from inside the tunnel. There is sometimes confusion with finding it because it's known as a train tunnel but no trains run through it. It's actually a tunnel for the stream that runs under the tracks. To reach it, you must enter through the woods, travel down a hill, and follow the stream to reach the creepy location that's covered in spray paint and littered.
Check that out there. And I'm thinking that's one of the hooks. Looks like it got broke. Yeah, it's definitely one of the hooks there. So if someone did hang themselves, why would?
Number 2. The Headless Woman. If you go to Louisville's 739-acre Iroquois Park in the middle of the night, you might spot a ghastly apparition. People who live in Kentucky have said to have heard about the Headless Horseman growing up, but not the Headless Woman of Kentucky. According to the legend, she can be found in Iroquois Park in Louisville. The story is told that a farmer's wife was alone while her husband was away on work and her home was attacked by an Indian tribe, and it's said that they took the life of her and her dog. The legend is that she can be seen after dark just as a thick fog rolls in, roaming the grounds and holding her head. Now coming in at number 1, the witch girl of Pilot's Knob. Just looking at the pictures of young Mary Evelyn Ford's grave feels a bit unnerving, with a series of interlocking white crosses forming a fence around a pit of gravel and the bars appearing unnaturally bent in some places. Then you hear the alleged backstory. A mother and daughter both accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake in 1916, with the mother's charred remains being carried to a far-off location while the daughter was buried in a steel-lined coffin covered in stone and encased in crosses to prevent her escape. Some have claimed to witness tiny footprints appearing in the gravel, or even a young ghostly figure trying to escape the gravesite. Kid ghosts, as we know, are the creepiest ghosts, no doubt.
This is the case that inspired The Exorcist. The Exorcist is a film that will always be remembered for its spinning heads,
Holy Spirit! Damien!
and its explicit yet somewhat appropriate dialogue.
Stick your up her, you mother worthless sucker.
Be silent!
And it's even funnier to think that the author of the novel that inspired the film, William Blady, started off writing comedy. Little did he know his scary side would produce one of the greatest horror movies of all time. Exorcist was an immediate hit to the box office when it hit theaters in 1973, racking up over $400 million along with winning many Academy Awards, Best Screenplay, and Golden Globe Award, Best Screenplay and Director. With worldwide attention, this led many pockets of fans to find out if they saw on screen was in fact a true story, and unfortunately, it was. It all started in 1940 Maryland when Roland was born into a German family. He was an only child, but as time went on, he eventually formed a bond with his Aunt Harriet. Other than showing Roland the ropes to life, such as riding a bike or learning to save money, she had a very spiritual approach instead. Aunt Harriet felt very connected to the occult and would even go as far as showing Roland a Ouija board in which he showed quick interest in, playing it almost daily at one point. Author Thomas B. Allen wrote a story on Roland Doe, and he claimed that shortly after his Aunt Harriet passed away, the family began to report very strange occurrences from inside of their home. Some of these include scratching sounds from the floors and the walls, constant mold and water damage, and I know what you're thinking, that could just be some simple house issues. Well, that's what the family said at first, until things got a lot worse. Furniture would begin to move on its own, specifically Roland's mattress would move around in the middle of the night, shaking his body with it. Roland claimed that he attempted to contact his deceased aunt via the Ouija board prior to these events, which only made it more reason to believe something supernatural was behind it all. At this point, they knew whatever was happening to him was in fact real, and they needed to do something about it before it just got worse. They seeked out every expert, including medical professionals, psychologists, except it wasn't until they decided to turn to God and ask their local Lutheran minister, Luther Miles Scholz. He was just perfect for the job because he was a firm believer of parapsychology, which is, for those who don't know, the study of alleged psychic phenomena. Even though this was more so related to those who had near-death experiences, Roland's case was far too interesting to not consider. He then decided to conduct his own self-experiment with the boy by taking him to his house to observe his actions, behaviors, and more importantly, what's going on around him. Shortly afterwards, his house became the scene of many alarming events, including unexplained noises, rearranged furniture, and even flying objects. And to back up these claims, there are about 48 witnesses to these events. And after being examined by medical and psychiatric doctors, they offered no explanation to the events, only describing it as supernatural. Scholz knew he was out of his element and offered the advice to seek out a Catholic priest for further assistance. The family was so fearful at this point that they would do anything. They weren't religious, but then they decided to have Roland baptized. Except even this would prove impossible. As he was being baptized, the priests were met with extreme rage, so they decided to stop altogether and just call it. They then went to the local Catholic priest, Father E. Albert Hughes, who just gave them some holy water and candles and just basically told them, yup, good luck guys. After realizing nothing was going to help Roland out and that his conditions were just worsening, they went back to the priest. This is when Father Hughes conducted an exorcism on Roland at Georgetown University Hospital, which is a Jesuit institution. During the exorcism, Roland managed to break free from his restraints and lash out at the priest's arm with a bed spring, causing the ritual to end abruptly. After this, the family then traveled out to St. Louis, Missouri in hopes of finding someone capable of helping Roland. One of Roland's cousins then spoke to his professors at the St. Louis University named Walter Halloran, who then contacted another priest by the name of William S. Boder. These priests agreed to see what's up, and after coming to one of the relatives' homes where Roland was staying, they concluded there was definitely something supernatural going on. They jotted down notes like shaking bed, flying objects, saying the boy was speaking in a growling voice, and even speaking in Latin. Aladdin, which was nothing new at this point, but only further confirmed that the boy was indeed possessed. Bowdern then went to the Archbishop in order to request another exorcism, in which he was granted. On the final exorcism at Alexian Brothers Hospital, Bowdern, along with Father Holleran and Van Roo, took Ronald to deep waters. This is the event that the movie takes parts of, because this is where things went from bad to worse. Father Holleran will report in his notes that the words evil and hell would appear on the teenager's body out of nowhere. When the priest called upon the saints of heaven for assistance, this is when they were called the mattress was violently shaken. And when they started to provoke the demon further, the possessed Roland lunged out at Holleran, breaking his nose completely. After a while, the priest called upon Saint Michael to expel Satan from his body. 7 minutes later, and Roland would come out of a trance-like state, with his first words being, "He's gone." When they asked the boy what he's just experienced, he's claimed to see the vision of Saint Michael vanishing Satan on a great battlefield. However, this is all speculated. Reporters were also all over the case due to the sheer mystery of it all. When they interviewed Father Holleran, he said that Roland Doe was saved and the devil had been expelled from his body. Now, how did the true story align with the movie, The Exorcist? Well, it all started thanks to this article in the Washington Post, which reported in August 1949 that priests have indeed performed an exorcism. However, this would only bring small attention, as the article left out many details, including the specifics of the exorcism, the name of the subject, and any solid evidence backing up the claim. It wasn't until William Peter Blatty, the writer I mentioned in the beginning, wrote the novel The Exorcist. He based the whole premise off the unofficial diaries kept by Father Holleran and Bowdern, who were two of the three priests that were present during the exorcism in the first place. The moment the book was released, it was an instant hit, staying on the bestseller list for over 54 weeks straight. The international attention influenced them to create a movie under the same name in 1973. However, as we see now, the movie and the true story have many clear differences. For example, the material turned a teenage boy named Roland into a 12-year-old girl named Regan. Another clear difference to mention is that Roland never turned his head 360 degrees. That was only in the movie. Roland did, however, curse profusely, vomit everywhere, gain scratches out of nowhere, and was even attempting to hurt the priest involved. So despite the movie not being one for one, they did enough to give justice to the true story. It wasn't until 5 years after the movie was released in 1978 when evidence started to convince the public further. Workmen demolishing part of the St. Louis hospital where Roland has stayed were removing furniture. In a locked room, they discovered an unofficial record of his visit tucked underneath a drawer. The document went into detail about those 4 nights the priest tried to exorcise Roland. Both the movie and the true story do have good endings though. Both victims eventually got the demon expelled and live out the rest of their lives. So what happened to Roland Doe after the exorcism? So first of all, as I mentioned, his real name had been confirmed to be Roland Edwin Hunkler. And after he underwent all the exorcisms, he and his family moved back to their old home in the East Coast and lived out a pretty normal life. After a few years, Roland would become a full-fledged NASA engineer, and he remained as one for 40 years. During this whole time, he hid his true identity and the fact that he was a victim of a demonic possession in fear of being judged at his own workplace. As a NASA employee, he had a lot to contribute as well. He helped patent a technology that allowed space shuttle panels to tolerate excessive heat, but apart from these advances, he would always be worried about his past being revealed. An unnamed source claimed, quote, "On Halloween, we always left the house because he figured someone would come to his residence and know where he lived and never let him have peace. He had a terrible life from worry, worry, worry." He would eventually retire at the agency in 2001, and 19 years later in 2020, he would pass away from a stroke. Shockingly, a priest arrived just before his death to give him his last rites, even though he never recalled asking for one. He just thought it was a sign from God and just took it. First of all, the church doesn't believe that every suspected case of demons or possession are true, and the Catholic Church does not fake exorcism. So for all you skeptics, the only reasonable thing to point out is if Roland Doe was acting irrationally, or was he actually possessed by the devil? Skeptic Joe Nickell wrote, quote, "Simply no credible evidence to suggest that the boy was possessed by demons or evil spirits, and maintains the symptoms of possession can be childishly simple to fake." Nickell dismissed suggestions that supernatural forces made scratchings or even markings or caused words to appear on the teenager's body in unreachable places. He continued saying, quote, "A determined youth, probably even without a wall mirror, could easily have managed such a feat. If it actually occurred, although the scratch messages proliferated, they never again appeared on a difficult to reach portion of the boy's anatomy. On one occasion, the boy was reportedly seen scratching the words hell and Christ on his chest by using his own fingernails." Nickell would release a longer statement saying, quote, "Nothing that was reliably reported in the case was beyond the abilities of a teenager to produce. The tantrums, trances, moved furniture, hurled objects, automatic writing, superficial scratches, and other phenomena were just the kind of things someone at Roland's age could accomplish, just as others have done done before and since. Indeed, the elements of poltergeist phenomena, spiritual communication, and demonic possession, taken both separately and especially together as one progressed to the other, suggests nothing so much as role-playing involving trickery. He concluded by saying that Roland was nothing more than just an agitated teenager. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys believe in the true story of Roland Doe, or was it just made for quick publicity? This is definitely one of those cases that will make you scratch your head and question what really went down in these hospital rooms. Also, what do you guys think about the movie? After hearing the true story, do you think they did a good job? I want to know all your thoughts in the comment section below. At number 10 spot, we have Black Aggie. Although this statue is beautiful, visitors claim that many spirits crowd around it as well, some believing that the statue is alive altogether. The brown statue belonged to General Felix Agnes and was formerly placed in Druid Ridge Cemetery in 1926, where it stood strong for 40 years until it was relocated to a museum. The townsfolk believed that the spirits of Druid Ridge Cemetery haunted the very statue. They would back up their claims by showing that no grass grew around the statue, and at night it would appear to have red glowing eyes. And many other people suggest that the statue starts to move around the cemetery during 3 a.m. Locals have also laid down warnings such as if you pay Aggie a visit after dark and look into her eyes, you will go blind. And the most popular one is that if you sit on her lap at midnight, you'll pass away within 2 weeks. At number 9 spot, we have Chessie. Basically Maryland's very own version of Nessie or the Loch Ness Monster. Just like the beast from Scotland, Chessie is a large serpent-like creature that lurks in the depths of Chesapeake Bay. Witnesses claim that the monster is around 25 to 40 feet long, and it uses its body as a sine curve to swim around the water. You know, sine, cosine, and tangent, you know. Sightings began in 1977 when the mass hysteria hit the locals, believing that the creature was truly out there, causing disappearances and drownings in the areas. Perhaps Chessie swam away from the area, or maybe it was just the 70s, you know, everyone just wasn't probably that sober. Also, Steven Spielberg's Jaws came out in 1975, which could have added more paranoia that people had towards the water. At number 8 spot, we have Michael Zittle Jr. Michael Zittle Jr. is considered the Wizard of South Mountain, and with that type of title, you best believe he has something magical about him. Michael was one of the 10 children of German immigrants who settled on the mountain in Zittlestown, including his 6 siblings. The only thing different about the Zittle family, apart from the others, is that they kept many odd traditions and superstitions with them from Germany. The family practiced sorcery and would be found using hex bags. This prompted a young Michael Zittle to carry on the tradition, eventually becoming the town's healer and conjurer. He would garner the nickname Wizard Zittle, and just like any other wizard you see on popular television, Michael had his very own spell book. Although the original writings were in German, he eventually got a few translated and published into a real book. At number 7 spot, we have Spirits of Point Lookout Light. In southern Maryland, looking over the Chesapeake Bay is the Point Lookout Lighthouse. Back in the Civil War, the park around the lighthouse was one of the most feared and notorious Union prisoner of the war camps, where an estimated 4,000 Confederate prisoners passed away on these very grounds. And the worst part too is that even though it was originally designed to hold no more than 10,000 prisoners, at the end of the war, it held over 20,000 men. The overcrowding along with the terrible living conditions created hell on earth for many of the prisoners. Many would take their own lives, fall gravely ill, or even freeze till they passed away. Now the lighthouse in the area is claimed to be America's most haunted lighthouse, with one person claiming that it felt like you're at the end of the world. The first keeper of the lighthouse passed away after only 2 months of working there, and then another keeper claimed to hear door knocks every single time he lived there, but when he opened it up, he would see an apparition jumping down into the water below. At number 6 spot, we have Maud Dyer. Maud Dyer was considered to be one of the first women accused of witchcraft in Leonardtown. She was born in the 17th century when it was a time when people would accuse you of being a witch for literally anything.
She's made of wood, and therefore... A witch! A witch!
Specifically, Maud Dyer was blamed for the plague of influenza that hit the whole entire town. Eventually, people began to rally up and set fire to her small hut in the woods. Although she managed to escape, her body was found frozen near a large rock. When the townsfolk removed her body, they noticed that an imprint of her right hand stayed on it, which led many locals to believe that she placed a curse on the town. And the craziest thing is that the rock with her imprint is still there to this day. Local legend has it that the rock itself is cursed, and that people who go near it or touch it will experience misfortune, including dizziness, fainting, illness, and a bunch of other bad things. They also say her spirit haunts the entire town to this day. Right in the hump of our list, we have Hager House. After standing for nearly 300 years, this old house in Hagerstown is believed to be infested with poltergeists and a whole load of other demons. This is because 13 people are said to have lost their lives in this very house. After it was handed down by its original owner, the house was used for rent during the Civil War all the way until World War II. However, in the 1840s, a large number of family members who lived in the house passed away. For example, Micah and Catherine Hammond's 4 children passed away in the span of 3 months in 1844. Just before this, in 1838, Alex and Susan Armstrong passed away along with their 3 infant children. So just know nothing good came out of this house, only bad things. When people visit the house today, they claim to see the spirit of a little girl who on some occasions is felt latching onto women as if they're tugging them not to leave the house. As well, there is said to be a lady in green who is looking out of the window and is walking around the halls that night. At number 4 spot, we have Crybaby Bridge. There's basically a Crybaby Bridge in every single state we cover, so it's no surprise it makes its way into our Maryland video. The Crybaby Bridge in Maryland is a popular yet horrifying spot located on the line between Prince George's and Anne Arundel's counties. The legend of this bridge goes that in 1970, a pregnant teenager was left abandoned by the baby's father. After she gave birth to the child, her family condemned her actions and tormented her with physical and emotional abuse. After realizing no one has anything nice to say about her, she decides to walk over to this bridge and with her baby, drowns the baby, then proceeds to jump in and take her own life as well. As the name suggests, you're able to hear the baby's faint crying underneath the bridge at night. Others claim to see a set of headlights and a black sedan trailing them after they stop at this bridge. At number 3 spot, we have Snallygaster. Don't be deceived by the odd name, this creature is one of the most confusing and terrifying creatures I've ever mentioned. Said to have resided in Frederick County, the Snallygaster is a dragon-like beast that is described as being a half reptile and a half bird that lives deep in the caves of South Mountain. Apart from its eye-popping looks, the beast is said to be responsible for stealing and eating farm animals and even children. The creature would be a silent killer and would swoop down from the skies, and before you would realize it would snatch you. The Snallygaster would consume its victims by completely draining all of its blood before taking you to its lair to consume you. The last sighting in Fredericktown occurred in March 1909 when 3 men fought the creature outside a railroad station for nearly an hour and a half before chasing it into the woods of Carroll County. However, who knows if this really went down, because I believe this creature of this caliber can easily take on 3 humans, but maybe that's just me. At number 2 spot, we're the Antietam Battlefield. Combine advanced technology with unstructured tactics and poor decision making, and you have the Battle of Antietam, otherwise known as the bloodiest single day in American history. For those who don't know, this is the battle that wounded or took the lives of around 23,000 soldiers, and remember, that's in one single day. The iconic Bloody Lane is a spot where both sides met and fought for their lives. It was a sunken part of the road, and considering it was where the most activity was, it's understandable that many bodies were stacked on this road, hence the name Bloody Lane. Gunfire and the smell of gunpowder have been reported in the area even when there's no one around. At number 1 spot, we have Coffin Rock. Coffin Rock, sometimes called Coffin Hill, was a large flat rock located in the Black Hills Forest in Maryland, about 20 minutes from Burkittsville. The local natives claim that before humanity, a dark energy lived in the area of the forest, so that when natives first entered the area, they were caught off guard, and as a result, a boy was kidnapped and then sacrificed on top of this Coffin Rock. Eventually, the warriors came together and fought back with their full force, but the dark energy was too strong and the entire tribe vanished without a trace. More people believed in this dark force after, in March of 1886, an 8-year-old boy, Robin Weaver, was reported missing in the area. Weeks later, he was found at Coffin Rock completely disemboweled. At a number 10 spot, we have Big Nose George. Born in March 1834, George Pear, more so known as Big Nose George, was a big-time cattle rustler and a highwayman. So in other words, he was up to no good. Then in 1878, him and his gang went on to murder 2 law enforcement officers, and immediately after, every authority figure in Wyoming was after this guy. While he was on the run, he did the great decision to separate from his group members, which is a really smart idea. But Big Nose George had a big mouth. When he was on the run, he decided to hit up a small bar in Miles City, Montana, and here they would get extremely drunk and boast to others in the bar that they did in fact kill 2 law enforcement officers in Wyoming. Eventually, he was arrested. In prison, he would try to plan an escape, only to be met with failure. When news broke out about his attempt to escape, an angry mob of around 200 people rushed into the jail and decided to take his life. After passing, doctors Thomas McGee and John Osborne took his body to study the chemistry of a criminal. Here they would cut out a portion of his head to investigate his brain, but no part went to waste. The cap of his head was used for an ashtray, pen holder, and a doorstop. It didn't stop there though. They then skinned him and then sent the skin to a tannery where he was literally made into a pair of shoes and then a medical bag. What the actual? Number 9, Pedro Mountain's mummy. The Shoshone Indians of Wyoming believed in a race of tiny people and said that they were responsible for the deaths of their comrades with the use of poisonous arrows. They described this race of people to stand from 20 inches to 3 feet tall. These people were known to be very hostile, not only to the natives but to their own kind. It was said that they would take the life of their own people if they became too sick and couldn't help the community anymore. So basically, if you're old, you're dead. After years and years, there was no solid evidence of these little people until 1932, a 14-inch fully formed mummy was found in the San Pedro Mountains near Casper, Wyoming. When they examined the object, they confirmed that it did have a real human remains inside, although it was unclear if it was a native child or if it was a race of little people. Eventually, the mummy would be passed on through different people, but all of them had one thing in common. They would be faced with extreme bad luck as soon as they possessed the mummy, which led many people to believe that it was cursed. It was passed on to a businessman named Yvonne Goodman, who passed away shortly after. Then it was passed on to another businessman, Leonard Walder, who also passed away only a year after having it. Now the whereabouts of the mummy are completely unknown. At number 8 spot, we have Ghost Ship of Plate River. If you visit the Pathfinder Dam on the North Plate River, there's a small chance you might find a glimpse of the ghost ship. It's believed that every 25 years, a death ship appears out of the midst near the dam. The first ever recorded sighting of this eerie vessel was in 1862 when a trapper named Leon Weber reported a large wave of fog, then saying it took the form of a sailing ship with a mast and sails covered in silvery shiny frost. He said he saw people on board, but they're all covered in this shiny frost. When he looked closer, he saw someone that looked exactly like his fiancée at the time as well. He then returned home from work a month later and discovered that his fiancée passed away the day he saw the ship. Then there was another sighting 25 years later in 1887 when cattleman Gene Wilson saw the exact frosty ship appear out of nowhere. He would also report people on board, but all of them were frozen, and as soon as he went home, he found out that his home was burned to ashes and his wife was lifeless 100 yards from the house. Number 7, Francis E. Warren Air Force Base. Located 3 miles west of Cheyenne, this Air Force Base was first established as Fort D.A. Russell in 1867. Named in honor of Civil War Brigadier General David A. Russell, it is the oldest continuously active military installation in the Air Force. Along with these old buildings, the legends are told that many of the old cavalry soldiers also continue to linger, often seen walking up the grounds or in the dormitories. Another story tells of a spirit that is said to harass female members of the security team. One of the most famous stories on the base takes place in Quarters 80, often referred as the Gus Quarters. During the early days, Quarters 80 was home to a young officer, but unfortunately for him, he was out on duty for the majority of the time, so one day he came home very exhausted and found a soldier entertaining his wife in their bedroom. The husband was furious and was looking to eliminate the man by any means necessary, but the soldier decided to make a decisive action and leap out the window. Instead of escaping, he accidentally hung himself by getting stuck on the clothesline outside of the home. Ever since this moment, the Gus Quarters are known for their supernatural activity, from objects being thrown across the room to just being grabbed out of nowhere. Number 6, the ghostly bride of Plains Hotel. In the Plains Hotel of Cheyenne, Wyoming, locals claim that there is a spirit of a bride that haunts everyone who steps in. Story goes that a lady named Rosie and her groom were on their honeymoon at the hotel. As the night went on, the husband decided to step out and get some drinks at a nearby bar. When Rosie arrived to fetch him, she noticed him walking upstairs with an escort, so of course she was shocked and decided to secretly follow them. This is when Rosie followed them all the way up to the room and in a jealous rage shot both of them with the husband's firearm, taking both of their lives immediately. After this, she would regret her actions and return back to the honeymoon suite to take her own life. Now, if you enter the Plain Hotel, you may be met with apparitions of the 3 people involved in the story. Rosie walks down the halls with a bright blue dress, which would have been the dress for her wedding. In the hump for our list, we have the Devil's Tower. This 1,200-foot tower of rugged rock is known as the Devil's Tower. It is located in northeast Wyoming, and when you look closer in the area, there is nothing that even closely resembles this behemoth. It's very unique in nature as it has all these grooves surrounded all around the rock. Although these can be explained by natural phenomena like a former volcano, Native Americans around the area have a completely different belief. Many claim that back in the day, the natives were being attacked by these gigantic bears, so to defend themselves, they would go up the Devil's Tower and pray to the Great Spirit to save them. They claim this is why the tower had grooves, because it was from the bears trying to claw themselves up on it. Number 4, Wyoming Frontier Prison. Located in Rawlins, Wyoming, the Wyoming Frontier Prison has the reputation of being one of the toughest prisons in the Wild West. Opened in 1901, it housed some of the most violent inmates, featured a dungeon, botched executions, and was known for rampant violence. Now a museum, employees and visitors alike have reported ghostly encounters. There have been apparitions spotted in the cell blocks and reports of a malevolent spirit in the dungeon who has threatened visitors. The prison is so notorious that it was featured on an episode of Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures, and ghost hunters have captured orbs on camera, but let me know what you guys think about that. The museum offers haunted Halloween night tours if you want to have a ghostly encounter of your own. Number 3, Heart Mountain Relocation Center. Starting with an old building originally used for an irrigation project prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Heart Mountain Relocation Center began construction on barracks and facilities to relocate American families of Japanese descent in June 1942. Over the next 3 years, the camp would house over 14,000 people. Just to put that into perspective, if they made this prison a town, it would be the 3rd largest city in Wyoming based on population alone. As World War II occurred, many horrors occurred within as well. Abuse, torture were just some of the things that the Japanese had to go through, with many people passing away as well. It eventually got shut down at the end of the war, but the discrimination towards the Japanese was too big that they couldn't let it go that easily. Today, the camp has been reinvented to be an informational, interpretive center, educating Americans about this dark time about our past. People working at the place claim to see these shadow people in the halls when it gets dark as well. Number 2, Old Faithful Inn. This is yet another story of a deadly wedding. I don't know what it is in Wyoming, but what's with all these bloody wedding stories? Are y'all not happy there? Built in 1903, Yellowstone's Old Faithful Inn is considered a National Historic Landmark. This, of course, means that it comes with some haunting tales. The Headless Bride of the Old Faithful Inn is the story of tragedy. A wealthy woman from back east fell in love with a con artist, told by her family that if she marries this man, they would disown her. She then took her inheritance and ran away with him. On their honeymoon in Yellowstone, he chopped off her head and ran away with her money long before they found the body. Now the Headless Bride has been spotted wandering the hotel in search of her lost love. All the way at our number 1 spot, we have the Sheridan Inn. The Sheridan Inn has been a community landmark for nearly 130 years. Miss Kate, one of the beloved employees and patrons, is said to have never left. In 1901, Miss Kate moved to Sheridan and began working at the inn. She moved into a room on the 3rd floor in 1906, where she would spend the rest of her life. A friend placed her ashes in the walls after her death in 1968, all while the inn was being renovated. She is now the innkeeper's guardian. You might feel her in a cold spot or have your lights turned on and off if you're at the inn.